Former President Donald Trump could be facing additional criminal indictments this summer. That's news coming from the Fulton County District Attorney, Fani Willis, who has sent a letter to a top law enforcement official in the state of Georgia to essentially set a timeline in regard to when they can expect criminal charges if she files criminal charges against Trump. Now, this particular investigation has to do with Trump's efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 election in Georgia. In her letter, Willis, again, the district attorney in Fulton County, Georgia, said that any charges would come during the court term that runs between July 11th and September 1st of this year. Her office has spent more than 2 years investigating whether Trump and his cronies illegally meddled in Georgia's 2020 election. Trump did lose that state to Biden, and after he did, he hit up the election officials in the state to basically demand that they find ballots that would overturn the results of the election from Biden to Trump. In fact, there's some evidence to that point, and here it is.
I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state. The people of Georgia are angry. The people of the country are angry. And there's nothing wrong with saying that, that you've recalculated.
CBS News has confirmed that this was one of at least 18 attempted calls from the White House to Secretary Raffensperger.
Now, Willis has a tough case ahead of her because there's just really a lack of evidence here. What is she gonna do? How would she bring these charges considering the lack of evidence, Cenk?
Yeah, so this has a ton of political implications, obviously, right? And I think that there might be a tipping point issue in terms of this beginning to finally hurt Donald Trump. We'll get to that in a second. In terms of the substance of it, look, I'm not of the same mind as a lot of other pundits. So I think that the Stormy Daniels case is actually the most open and shut. He definitely did it. His co-conspirator went to prison for 3 years. People say, oh, we just got him on hush money to a porn star. I don't care what it's about. Did he break the law or didn't he? And how much evidence do you have? On that case, we have overwhelming evidence. In this case in Georgia, it should be a lot tougher to prove, because you have to prove that he didn't just ask for votes to be found that were legitimately his, but votes to be found that were not legitimately his, and to rig the election, right? So it's super easy to get away with this crime by just being a little vague, right? The problem for Trump is he's an idiot. And he can't be a little vague.
He ain't vague.
No, and
he was actually the specificity in the number of ballots he wanted Raffensperger to find is pretty incredible.
No,
right?
guys, the only way that you could get convicted for this crime is to do exactly what Trump just did.
It's amazing.
He's like, I need 11,780 votes. No, you're supposed to say, hey, are you sure the recount is right, right? Now, first of all, you're not supposed to do any of that. You're supposed to accept the Democratic elections as they actually are, not as you wish them to be, right? But by the way, asking Georgia election officials or any state officials, are you sure? I have a legal right to recount, a hand recount, no problem.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Zero. Exactly. And in fact, Georgia did several of those recounts, including a hand recount. So Trump asking for those is not remotely illegal, right? But when after all that is done, he calls and says, give me 11,780 votes, one more than I need to win. And then he says, why don't you recalculate? Instead of saying, hey, are you sure that you got the count right? Are you sure that you don't have any missing ballots? He's being as brazenly illegal as he could possibly be. You know how he likes to say, I had a perfect call, in his first impeachment, I had a perfect call with the leader of Ukraine. I mean, this kind of was a perfect call in the opposite direction.
Yeah, it's a perfect call for the prosecution.
Exactly.
Right, so obviously I was being sarcastic when I noted that there was a lack of evidence. There's clearly some pretty significant evidence, you just heard it. Now, let's rewind a little bit to kind of give you the background on this investigation and this case. Because prior to the possibility of criminal indictments being brought forth to a jury, a grand jury, there was a special jury involved, right? So what happened with this special jury? Special jury that heard evidence in the case for roughly 7 months, recommended more than a dozen people for indictments, and its forewoman strongly hinted in an interview with the New York Times in February that Trump was among them. So I actually went back to read that piece from back in February by the New York Times to see what the actual statement was. The forewoman that they're referring to is Emily Kors, asked whether the jurors had recommended indicting Trump. Kors would not answer directly, but said, "You're not going to be shocked. It's not rocket science. It's not going to be some giant plot twist. You probably have a fair idea of what may be in there. I'm trying very hard to say that delicately." So that was the provocative statement that she gave to the Times back in February. Real quick, before I go to you, Cenk, but keep in mind that ultimately it is up to Fani Willis, the prosecutor, to make the decision as to who gets charged, what the charges might be, and she will bring those charges to a grand jury to move forward with this case if she chooses to. But it does seem as though she intends to move forward with this case.
So Anna's giving you the facts, I'll give you the analysis. 2 things, number 1, yeah, they're definitely indicting Trump. And number 2, meaning that he's among the 12. And number 2, they're definitely gonna go forward with it. And so why do I say that? Especially given that there's been a lot of talk about Trump indictments and it's taken forever and ever and ever, and most of the time it's just a lot of baloney and just Democrats trying to grab headlines. In this case, in her letter, she talks over and over again about the need for security.
Yes.
They don't need security for 11 other bozos, okay? So it's like, oh my God, they have indicted Jim Jablowski, who was helping Trump at the local level. That guy's under a bus already, right? He's under a tank. Trump's not gonna give him a dime. No one cares, his voters don't care. No, the only reason you need that kind of massive security is because Trump is among the names and you're definitely going to indict him, okay?
Right, and her letter, just to give you even more context, was sent to Sheriff Patrick Labat. I actually want to read excerpts from the letter to kind of buttress what Cenk is saying here in regard to the calls for additional security when these indictments are announced. She writes, quote, "In the near future, I will announce charging decisions resulting from the investigation my office has been conducting into possible criminal interference in the administration of Georgia's 2020 general election. I am providing this letter to bring to your attention the need for heightened security and preparedness in coming months due to this pending announcement."
Yeah, they're definitely indicting him.
By the way, she has some members of her staff wear bulletproof vests.
I know, yeah.
Which is crazy.
It is, but on the other hand, right-wingers are violent. And so-
No, I'm not saying it's crazy that she's having them wear the vest. It's crazy that we live in this era where political violence has become normalized.
Yeah, it's so normal that we have to prepare for it ahead of time, et cetera.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get to the beef, which is how does this affect the election and politics and stuff? So look, I always believe that that they're like, first when everybody said after the midterms Trump is done, you saw us here say that's not remotely true. Trump not only still has a great chance, but he wavers from a 50-50 election to being the overwhelming favorite. He was never ever the underdog. So there was too much hype about the demise of Donald Trump that was never true. Now they're in reverse and they say, oh my God, he got indicted, that only helps him in the polling, it's over, Trump's definitely gonna be the candidate. That's also not true. And so one indictment is one thing, but 3 or 4 of them, it starts to pile up and people get tired, right? Even like hardcore MAGA never gets tired, but the rest of the Republican electorate, as much as you can make a distinction between hardcore MAGA and 93% of Republicans that voted for Trump last time. So when this one comes in, as it looks like it's definitely gonna come in, and probably at least a third one comes in, I think that Republican voters are gonna start to get really worried, right? And by the way, a huge point in my favor in that kind of prediction or whatever you wanna call it, is that after he got the initial bump from the first indictment, in the last couple of weeks, he's lost 10 points. So it went up and then now it's coming back down. So the thing is, he needs someone who's really good at this to knock his ass out in the midst of all of these legal troubles, et cetera. Not necessarily now, but as the indictments pile up. Well, I don't know that we got that, guys. You'll see later in the show, DeSantis is weak. So, and Trump is pummeling him.
Trump is pummeling him and has now put out one of the most vicious, and I would argue, effective ads against DeSantis. I can't wait to show that to you guys and talk about that in more detail. But I think, I don't know, my prediction on this is a little different, Cenk. I think that Trump is inevitably going to win the Republican nomination. And when it really comes down to it, the election will be decided by independent voters. So is this gonna turn independent voters off? Are they willing to overlook some of Biden's flaws and vote for him, considering all the chaos that comes along with Trump? That's the real question. And we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, look, this election could be the most boring and worst election of our lifetimes, as it's a Biden and Trump rematch. Oh, literally nobody in the country wants that, except hardcore MAGA and hardcore establishment knuckleheads Democrats in DC, but those are like 14 guys, right? The rest of the Democratic Party doesn't want it either. But yeah, it certainly could be that. Or you got wild cards galore. I mean, this guy, if he's indicted 3-4 times, really he's gonna run in the midst of all those court cases? Remember, Trump might make a deal and to get out of the race, but to get rescued from all these indictments. So who knows, right? And then on the Democratic side, Biden's gonna make it all the way to the election? I don't know. Well, I don't know. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat, emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.